This game against Nottingham Forest at the weekend is a massive test to see whether Spurs have truly turned a corner under Thomas Frank. But before we get into the Forest game, which we are going to preview, I want to talk about some more of the new tactics and the new tweaks that we saw in the game against Slavia Prague on Tuesday night and how we could see them help us potentially in the game against Nottingham Forest. Welcome back to the Bowman YouTube channel. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're enjoying the content at the moment. Massive thank you for all the support on the channel. As usual, feels like we're really back up to speed, which is really, really positive going into a very busy time of the year. It would mean the world to me if you could subscribe, join the channel, join the community, and drop a like on the video and let me know your thoughts on everything that I talk about in the video, of course. Now, we spoke about in yesterday's video or Thursday's video, depending on when this comes out and when you're watching it, about Tottenham playing through Slavia Prague's man-to-man press and how effective that was. Obviously, it's going to be a different challenge against Nottingham Forest at the weekend in terms of playing against a low block. But one tactic and one tactical tweak that might be able to help us in that game is the role of Jed Spence and this new inverted role that he and also Pedro Porro picked up at times in the game against Slavia Prague. Now, I just want to go through some examples and why I think this could actually be beneficial to Tottenham and why it elevates Spence's game back near toward the level that we saw under Ange Postecoglou last season, where everybody really sort of started to fall in love with him. Now, I think Jed Spence has got tremendous physical attributes and ball carrying ability that means he can play out wide. But also in this system with the profile of left wingers that we've got, and especially in the absence of Destiny Udogie, I think him actually coming inside the pitch can help us a lot. Now, we saw it in deep build-up. Again, you can see here Slavia Prague locked onto that man-to-man press, and that's not going to be the case against Nottingham Forest, I don't think, anyway, on Sunday. But what's encouraging about this is we do just see a little bit more rotation. We see Spurs kind of developing a clear structure in the way that they want to play, but with more fluidity and more movement in that. And having that kind of principle and Thomas Frank seemingly giving the players a bit more freedom to be able to do that is a good shift in mindset, I think, moving forwards and can help us in these games where we're playing against lower sides. Now, Vicario plays the ball long. Richarlison wins the knockdown there. Now, Spurs kind of play it back there after Richarlison losing it. Romero then opens up the lines with this great little pass into Jed Spence, who is comfortable playing on the half turn and receiving the ball in those pockets, and it allows Wilson Odobert to do what he does best. Now, we've spoken about the role, the kind of relationship between Wilson Odobert and Destiny Udogie down that left-hand side. We saw Jed Spence play with Mawani on the left-hand side on Saturday, but I really like Spence and Odobert as a partnership as well, because it allows Odobert, who is someone that is comfortable operating in the pockets, but he's more comfortable, I think, operating out wide, to do what he does best and be that 1v1 outlet and threat for us. As you can see here, Spence recycles the ball inside, plays it to him, and then he can do what he does. Jinx inside, then tries to go back on the outside, actually loses it this time, but the intent is obviously really good. And we saw some other good examples of Odobert facing up and taking on his man in that game against Slavia Prague. And against lower blocks, that is going to be really useful to have Spence in this kind of position here to help recycle the ball across, and Odobert out here doing what he does best to try and unlock that block in that 1v1 situation. Now, again, some more examples. Romero into Spence again here. Spurs still building up in that sort of familiar structure, but again with more rotation. Now, Spence can take it in those kind of areas where he's comfortable there, kind of with players around him, which is obviously very helpful. Now, again here, Spurs play it back. You see Pedro Porro now invert into midfield, with Javi Simmons coming deeper to collect the ball, or at least showing for it, which is really good to see. Romero plays it into him. He bounces it back to Romero. And then as you see, Pedro Porro can now make this move inside. And Romero plays it out wide, out to Van der Ven here. But look at the position Porro has picked up. Really good to see that fluidity and that movement and that freedom afforded to players in this system, which is only going to be helpful when we play against teams that are sat in against us. Again, now it's Spence picking up the ball in deeper areas. Spurs in that kind of familiar build-up shape. But it's now Archie Gray, as you can see here, that's dropped into the centre-back position. With Romero up here, Jed Spence in midfield. That's three players not in their kind of traditional position there. And it's good to see Spurs applying those sorts of principles and giving players that freedom to actually move teams about that little bit more. Spurs then go long into Richarlison and Spence. What he's so good at and why he actually can really help us in these central positions is when you do go more direct to get over that high press, he's very good at physically at getting in and snuffling up those loose balls. And again, like I said, allowing Wilson Odobert, who's out wide here, to do exactly what he does best. He can then play that ball out and he can isolate a winger 1v1. Now, This is going to be really key in the game against Nottingham Forest on Sunday, which presents an entirely different challenge to what we've seen so far in these previous two games. Because as I said in the video yesterday, the Brentford and Slavia games tactically, in terms of the way those other two teams have set up, have played into Thomas Frank's hands somewhat in terms of how he likes to approach teams and get the better of them. He likes exploiting space. He's very, very good at that. Top manager when it comes to doing that. That's why he's succeeded at Brentford. That's why we succeeded in games against Manchester City. We play on the counter-attack, etc. Xavi Simons kind of making those channel runs against Brentford, right? Quick passing, open up the space against teams that like to come out against us. But Nottingham Forest are not going to do that. You can see here in the game under Sean Dyche at home to Manchester United, they still were able to get a good amount of shots, good amount of corners, getting up the pitch, but only 41% possession. Now, I put this spreadsheet together earlier. This line here is pre-Dyche, and this is post-Dyche. You can see their goals per game for are up. Their goals against per game are down. Their XG per game is up. Their XG against is down, and their possession is down as well. Obviously, a mix of Nuno, a mix of Ange here. You can really see, obviously, under Ange, 63% possession, 65% possession, 62% possession. That Chelsea game generating 2.2 XG in that one at home. A totally kind of different style shift, really, as you can again see here. The formation that Sean Dyche has kind of reverted to after Ange tinkered was a 5-3-2-3-4-3 that Ange went with in the last three games. It's kind of back to that 4-2-3-1 shape consistently that we know that that Nuno liked to play, and we know like Sean Dyche likes to opt for. He played a 4-3-3 away at Utrecht on Thursday, and obviously going into this game, they haven't got particularly fresh legs, although he did rotate quite a bit in that win against Utrecht. It will be a very different team on Sunday, I'd imagine, to what we saw in that game. But there was a good article on the Premier League, just in terms of, it's almost like Sean Dyche has kind of just gone back to basics a little bit in the Premier League. Their tackles per game are up massively, 5 per game. Their duels one are up by nearly 10 per game. This is not necessarily including the last few games. This is, I think, when Dyche was 4 games in. Look at the distance they're running per game. It's up. The sprints per game are up as well. And like I said, that shift back to kind of that 4-2-3-1 shape. Now, this is the team that I'd expect them to go with on Sunday. Williams, Murillo, Milenkovic, Savona, Hutchinson, Sangare, Anderson, Ndoye, and Gibbs White and Jesus. Now, obviously, the threats that Spurs have to worry about are Ndoye on the break, excellent ball carrier. Elliot Anderson on the break, excellent ball carrier. Morgan Gibbs White on the break, excellent ball carrier. Hutchinson can get you up the pitch as well, but it's mainly these 3 guys, or 4 guys, or 3 guys, I'd say, that, especially with the way that Sean Dyche wants to play on transition, sit back, counter-attack, that Spurs have got to be wary of. But also the mindset in this game, you can't go into the game almost too worried about that. It has to be in the back of your mind, but that shouldn't really play a part in the thinking from Thomas Frank. It should be about how can we go and dominate the game? How can we play through what is going to be a deep block? Now, in the Brentford game, as I mentioned, right, Brentford did play into our hands a little bit with the 4-4-2 press, and the kind of that higher press with Thiago and Damsgaard committing forward, and the team joining them, Slavia Prague, exactly the same. This is going to be a different test, but we did also see at points Spurs' ability to play through Brentford's lower block with that 4 across the last line. Again, the 3 the 3 kind of at the back. You see Spurs' shape here, what we've been talking about when we've played our best football kind of come to fruition here. We've spoken about this in previous videos in the week. Graham Bentancur is that pivot there, and then the 5 kind of across the front line with Jed Spence a little bit disconnected from it, but that's the rough kind of structure of the team. It allows you more options in possession, that fluidity and that freedom that the likes of Simons and Kudus had. But I think Spurs are going to find themselves in quite similar situations to this against Nottingham Forest on Sunday, although I think Forest will probably defend that little bit deeper. And the key thing here in this move that fashioned a bit of a chance for Spurs was Xavi's ability and desire to drop into the pocket. He kind of joined Richarlison and Moani on that last line. He drops into the pocket here. Romero patient on the ball. And when Simons kind of jumps, it drags that defence up slightly, and Romero then fires that ball into Richarlison. Richarlison's hold-up play good in this game. He pops it off to Xavi straight away. He's got 3, 4, 5 men around him there, and Xavi moves that ball quickly. He's pressed there. Yarmouk it is that jumps onto him. Richarlison pops it off, but Simons opens up the gap. He plays it to Bentancur. Bentancur can then move it on. to, I think he goes straight out to Jed Spence there. And then Xavi moves into the pocket. It's going to be really, really key for Spurs to shift the ball quickly, to manipulate that low block, to create space in the wide areas, but also create space in the pocket for Xavi Simons to create in and around the edge of the box. Jed Spence here, holding the width into Xavi Simons on the edge with men behind him. He tries a little flick round the corner first time. And I've showed this example a few times in videos in recent weeks. It doesn't quite come off, but it's really good to see that intent, and it's really good to see patterns to be able to deal with teams who sit in like this against us. And that has been Thomas Frank's biggest kind of kryptonite, I guess, obviously so far. So this is why I think it's going to be a big test to see if he has turned the corner, to see if he sets us up in this way. Now, I think one of the things that's going to be obviously interesting to see in this game was that against Brentford, when in that game we played with Mawani and Richarlison. Mawani was a left winger, Richarlison obviously playing through the middle. But in these kind of situations, when Brentford did sit deeper and we had to try and open the door, Mawani was playing almost as a second striker at times, occupying that last line. And this was kind of the pattern, as you see. Romero punch it into Richarlison, back. No, just get rid of that. Back to Simons here. And Spurs can move the ball. Oh, what's going on? Spurs can then move the ball quickly, sort of through it and out, and then Spence and then Simons comes into this pocket. You need Simons to be able to have that freedom. But I do wonder in this game if he will opt for something different or if he'll opt for the same thing. I would like to see Spurs go relatively unchanged from the game against Slavia Prague on Tuesday. I would maybe bring Mawani in for Richarlison, because of his link-up play, his ability to occupy defenders, although Richarlison, I think he's good at that as well. And actually, Richarlison, in these kind of games, does offer you that movement in the box. He's brave when the ball comes in, and I do think our crossing is going to be the key feature of the game. Kudus being able to isolate defenders 1v1, getting doubled up on with Ndoye and Williams and Porro, this kind of cross from deeper areas. I think that's going to be key. And I think Richarlison, as we saw at Forest away a few years ago when they had Steve Cooper, do you remember Kulusevski putting that excellent cross, and Richarlison gets in between the two centre-halves, keeper has to come out, and Richarlison just gets there first and heads it in. So maybe I would opt with Richarlison. I'm still a little bit undecided on that. I just really like what I've seen from Mawani so far this season. But Richarlison is also in good form, and when he does start games, he does score goals for Tottenham. But what might be slightly different to the dynamic that we saw against Brentford and what we saw against Slavia Prague is he might go with Wilson Odobert on that left-hand side, because of Wilson Odobert's ability to go 1v1 and help move that low block around, or I guess be the beneficiary of that low block being moved around, so he can isolate the defender 1v1. I think that's going to be crucial, because I think they're going to probably double up on Kudus because they know his threat, but also it's hard to double up on Kudus because they'll also be wary of Porro's crossing ability, which hasn't been at his best, I would say, but from these kind of areas he can be really dangerous. And I'd like to see plenty of rotations between these two, with Kudus being allowed to come central to also cross from that half space, and also Porro being able to cross from the line. These kind of in-swingers, or the sort of, the in-swingers from there onto the left foot of Kudus as well. These two being allowed freedom to rotate across that five across the front will be really handy, I think, for Spurs, or really key for Spurs on picking that kind of low block apart. But it'd be interesting to see what he does do on that left-hand side, whether he will opt again for that kind of almost like two striker like setup with Mawani to get you as many kind of bodies in the box. But I think Spence actually in this game, central to help you deal with the threat of the likes of Gibbs-White and Elliot Anderson going this way from a defensive point of view. I think it adds a layer of security. Spence being able to kind of, if the ball does get turned over, when Spurs are set up kind of in this sort of shape, I think having Spence in kind of those central areas, especially as Hutchinson isn't the best on transition, he's not that sort of winger that you have to worry about. It's more Ndoye, it's more Gibbs-White, it's more Anderson coming from these kind of central areas. To have Spence in there as almost a bit of a blanket, he can kind of drop back into that three at times as well, kind of invert Romero kind of out here, giving you that bit of ability on the ball to punch the ball through the lines into that pocket where Simons can kind of operate and combine in tight spaces. I'd quite like to see that. And also it allows Odobert to operate in the areas where he's more comfortable. 1v1 in those kind of wide areas. I saw Kish talking about this earlier as well. I think these kind of underlapping runs when Savona moves out, Hutchinson kind of moves out, Sangare might move out at times. If you can shift the ball out to Odebear here. Spence can kind of make this run. And I actually think Spence is more comfortable sometimes crossing when he actually doesn't have as much time to think and can play that ball low across the box. So I think this kind of underlapping run to move that low block apart is going to be also key. And Simmons, again, I just think you have to afford him the sort of freedom to go wherever he wants. Pick up, because they're going to try and mark him out of the game, aren't they? They know his threat if he does start. I think this is the team that I would start with. I think you need to build some continuity in that midfield as well. I think Bentancur and Gray at the moment, despite how much I want to see Bergvall, despite how much I like Bergvall, he's probably our best partnership. I probably would say that. And I think Gray as well is one that if Spence likes to drop into these areas, I think Gray has made good runs into these channels at points as well to get him beyond the defence, to kind of get behind that line. And again, you can allow Simmons to kind of drop deeper here to let you connect on this side, them kind of force him to jump out. Then Gray can kind of make this run from here. Simmons out then to Odebear, and then down the line, and Gray's in. Can he get that cross across the front? And then obviously, as they kind of move, as they sort of move to try and stop that, if Gray can kind of then, if he receives it in these kind of areas and then has to then check back with them dropping deeper, get Simmons kind of in these areas, in and around the edge of the box, where he can then either try and fire a little bounce pass into Richarlison, pick it back up and shoot from these kind of areas himself, have a go, or try and float the ball into the box with Richarlison getting in there, Porro potentially getting in there as well, Kudus arriving in the back post. So I just think that fluidity of movement, that freedom, applying the same sort of principles that we've seen in the last few games, despite the fact that we'd be playing against a different setup. It's just good to see Thomas Frank have that almost like shift in mentality over the last couple of games to be that aggressor, play on the front foot, see, not even necessarily that, but it's just more the freedom that he seems to be giving players. And I think you've got to carry that into these kind of games where players are playing with more confidence. I do genuinely believe that. Let me know in the comments whether you'd go for Richarlison or Kolo Muani in this game, whether you go for potentially both of them, whether you would go for Wilson Odebear. I'm not quite sure as much as I think Matisse Tell was really good when he came on the other night, and I actually was a little bit underwhelmed by Odebear's performance as he faded out the game. But I think tactically, to have someone that is really comfortable in these wide areas to stretch the pitch like Wilson Odebear, I think he's the go-to fit for this game. I don't really like Spence and Tell as kind of a set up together on that left-hand side, to be honest. I think you like Tell in those kind of inside areas where he can get shots off. And I think if Spurs are either chasing the game or we go 1-0 up and you want someone that's a bit more of a counter-attacking threat, I think Tell can be that. But I think I'd definitely go for Odebear from the start from this game. But yeah, the crosses from wide areas are going to be really, really important from Kudus and Porro. Kudus isolating the defender 1v1 as he loves to do. They're going to double up on him as much as they can. Porro, the crosses from these kind of areas, playing through the lines, being brave to do that, as we saw against Brentford in these kind of situations. It's going to be interesting to see how he lines up across that front. It'd be interesting to see whether he does use Spence as an inverted fullback, as we've seen the last couple of games, which I definitely think he should do to help Odebear have that space 1v1 and stretch the pitch as much as you can, and offer that defensive solidity, that blanket, that extra bit of protection when Forest do like to break. Spence in those central areas defending, I think, will help us, and he can just help recycle the ball. He's good at receiving it in there. Let's see that again. So I think this will be a big test to see if Thomas Frank has kind of turned a bit of a corner. We do set up as the aggressor in this game against a team that is going to sit off us, and we really take the game to them and try and be as fluid in possession as possible to move that block around. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to like the video and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.